today I will be giving a quick introduction to FPI and who we are. We will have Corianne Mansell from RRS talking about some residential case studies, kind of a white paper that we did last year. And then we'll have Kate Kurtz from the city of Seattle talking about her communities program. And then we will have Jake Duame from Specialized Environmental Technologies, and he'll be giving us the composter perspective. And then we will save all those Q&A questions for the end. So just a very quick overview of FPI. We are the trade association for the food service packaging industry. We are North American facing, so mainly US and Canada. And we are focused on food service products. We do have about 90% of the US and Canadian industry within our fold. So this would be raw material suppliers like paper mills, plastic suppliers, all the way through our converters and manufacturers of those materials, making the cups, plates, bowls, clamshell containers, and then also the machinery suppliers. And then we do work closely with food service distributors and restaurants and operators. Within that group of our membership, we do have our special recovery groups, and we're focused mainly on the recovery of either recycling or composting of cups, containers, boxes, and bags. We found that this is usually the majority of our industry and the majority of our products that our industry makes. So these are the items that you see on your screen that we focus on. So we have 4 recovery groups. Today we're going to be talking about the Paper Recovery Alliance and Plastics Recovery Group because they are interested in getting paper and plastic compostable packaging composted. We do also have the Paper Cup Alliance that is focused on paper cup recycling specifically, and then the Polystyrene Foam Recycling Coalition, also known as FRC, that's focused on polystyrene foam. And here are our current Paper Recovery Alliance and Plastic Recovery Group members. I'm sure a lot of those brands and if you're in the packaging space, those manufacturers are very familiar to you, but if not, here they are for you. And then just a quick overview of our approach. On the next slide, I'll show you what our foundational work that we do, but, we're trying to resolve end market barriers. We want to work with composters and talk with them about contamination. How do you get more food waste? How are these items breaking down in the piles? We want to dispel myths and then also provide support to them. And then we want to increase access for recovery of those materials. So, we are adding community access, we're tracking that access, we're promoting that, to the residents that, hey, you guys can recycle these or compost these products. And then we encourage spontaneous uptake. And we found out that that is a great feedback loop because municipalities and communities see other communities do it and they want to compost as well. And then all of that leads to the increase of food service packaging. And so we started our journey in the recovery space back in 2012. And over the years, I guess over past decade and more, we've done a lot of research into food service packaging on where it goes. Does it stay where it's generated, or does it go home? Does it go to the office? Where is this material going? And how do we recover that? And how does it flow through these waste recovery systems? And how can we leverage our knowledge and work with municipalities and waste haulers to get more food service packaging recovered? So with this foundational work, we do give out grants. So I'll say that again, we give out grants. So working with communities a lot with education and working composting research as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Corianne Mansell, who's a consultant at RRS. She worked on the community residential survey that we did last year, and she is bringing 8 years of experience in the organics, waste management, zero waste, and sustainability initiatives. Prior to joining RRS, Corianne was with strategic partnership coordinators at the Center for Ecotechnology, supporting CET's Waste Food Solutions portfolio. and she was conducting on-site technical assistance and coordinating initiatives to implement and expand solutions to manage food scraps at cities and states across the U.S. Corianne was recently awarded the U.S. Composting Council's Young Professional of the Year Award last year in 2024. So take it away, Corianne.
Great. Good morning. Or afternoon for some. It's a pleasure to be here. As noted, I'm Corianne Mansell. I'm a consultant at Resource Recycling Systems, or RRS, and I was part of the project team that helped evaluate several residential organics collection programs that do accept certified compostable products. And I'm looking forward to reviewing some of our findings. So our objective of this white paper was really to evaluate the opportunities and challenges to accepting the certified compostable products in curbside residential collection programs. So we do acknowledge that, of course, front of house source separation can be a challenge, but we also recognize that accepting these products can also help increase diversion opportunities. So as such, we wanted to speak with several communities that have implemented programs for collection of organics that accept certified compostable products and consolidate their recommendations and those best practices from implementing those programs. And so our approach was to collect detailed information and data on program rollout and its implementation, and then conduct interviews with the program operators to confirm details that we found and hear more about their lessons learned, what worked well, what didn't work so well, and really help consolidate those key insights. And so that's what our report intends to do. And so here you can see the programs that were included, including Seattle, which you'll hear more on today, as well as San Francisco, Davis, Napa, and Fremont, all in California, and then also Minneapolis, Ramsey County, both in Minnesota, and then also Austin, Texas. So are some of the big bucket trends, which looked at how the program is initially designed and rolled out, the approach to phasing in or accepting certified compostable products and packaging, rolling out those educational and community engagement tactics, hopefully to monitor and reduce contamination, the supportive policies and goals, that being waste reduction goals that can help drive the implementation and strategy behind the residential organics collection programs, monitoring the program performance overall, and then working, of course, closely with the end site, that being the composter. So now I'll walk through some of those key insights, that being starting with program design. So looking at how you can start small. Many programs began with a pilot for residential organics collection, allowing time to address those challenges before implementing a citywide collection program. And so 5 of the 8 profiled programs started with a pilot. Then looking at 3-stream collection, so source separation of trash, as well as those recyclables, and then also the organics material. And then in designing that program is looking at pay-as-you-throw mechanisms to incentivize and encourage residential participation, and then also looking at how you're going to monitor contamination and notify residents or carts if there are any source separation issues or contamination. And then onwards, looking at certified compostable products and packaging. And so partnering with certified compostable programs and those insights to help verify product compostability is important. That also helps reduce contamination and improve that collaboration between your end site and your haulers, really looking at what is certified compostable and what truly is going to be accepted at your end site that you partner with. And then specifying the acceptable items, focusing on packaging that really captures food waste while avoiding items that might ultimately introduce contamination. So looking strategically at what is on that acceptable list first and foremost, kind of segueing back to program design. So how are you going to start off to reduce any potential confusion and simplify and specify those acceptable items? And then also, as you maybe roll out your organics collection program for residents, carefully integrate new items. So successful programs gradually expanded the list of accepted items and minimize the removal of previously accepted ones because re-education can be quite challenging when product lists continue to change. Then looking at education and community engagement, this is not a one and done strategy. This is a constant process. And so having clear, consistent, and robust messaging is going to be really important, specifically around those acceptable items. And then also utilizing the range of communication platforms. So of course, social media comes up, but then also going to in-person events and broadening that educational reach with your residents is really important. And then also, depending on the community, translating materials to help also distribute educational messaging around the materials that are accepted is really important, as well as partnering with those community organizations, businesses, and institutions as much as possible to streamline that messaging around what is and is not appropriate for the organics collection cart. And so that's where also really looking again, that first bullet, clear, consistent, and robust across all of those communication streams, languages and translation services and community groups is really important. And then if possible, offering technical support to businesses and residents to improve their practices around source separation is also important. And then also another engagement tool is potentially offering facility tours with your end site, that being your compost site. And then allowing residents to opt in to organics collection services with a blend of mandatory services can help increase participation while reducing contamination. So mandatory rollout or provision, but allowing some services to have some flexibility can help reduce contamination. And then also, many of the communities that we spoke with have city or county waste reduction or zero waste goals that help drive the implementation of the source separation programs and residential organics collection programs. And so 7 of the 8 interviewed programs cite organics diversion as a key strategy in their zero waste plans. And so that's how that can build off one another when you're looking at designing and then rolling out these programs. And then also states like California, Colorado, Minnesota, and Washington all also have also enacted labeling requirements for packaging. So looking at the certified compostable products and the labeling requirements around there can also help reduce those lookalikes or confusion in those certified compost or in those compostable packaging that is distributed to residents. And then also participation and performance monitoring, I should say, looking at targeted feedback, progress tracking, and then technology. So monitoring the performance of these programs is also really important for its ultimate growth and success. And so one of those opportunities includes uh, where understanding what residents are engaging and utilizing those organics carts can be challenging, especially when there's mandatory organic separation And so some communities did note that they weren't quite sure how many residents are fully utilizing the organics collection programs. So looking at how the program can be designed to evaluate that. And then also implementing structures for targeted feedback, such as lid flips, which are visual inspections of carts during collection, are a proven and effective uh, strategy to reduce contamination. And then also placing oops tags or contamination notices directly on carts provides a feedback mechanism for those residents that are source separating the organics. Then also waste characterization studies can help track contamination, evaluate messaging for effectiveness. So what are areas for improvement specifically around certain materials, and then identify areas for focused education. And then also technologies are continuing to be utilized, such as cameras on collection trucks to help identify contamination in real time, which can help address issues earlier in the process because once it ends up at the end site, it can sometimes be unknown of where the contamination came from. And then lastly, composting facility readiness. So in that initial bullet, that program design, as you're working with your collection mechanism or your hauler, as well as your composter, looking at those, building those strong relationships can help these programs adapt over time. Clear communication and understanding of what a successful program looks like. It supports its ultimate growth, and also integrating those waste characterization studies and best practices or timelines is also important for monitoring that contamination. And then also supporting those compost sites with enhanced processing technologies, if possible, to manage ultimately contamination that might end up there. And then also looking at the contract design where material is going to be processed, really being familiar with that, what is an acceptable level of contamination, and then also what is that composition of material and what is our target goal. So ultimately, those were our key insights and the summary of uh, findings from those interviews, and we're very appreciative of those communities that were willing to speak with us. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Corianne. That was super insightful. So thank you for doing that and presenting that to us. Up next, we have Kate Kurtz as the Organics Program Lead for Seattle Public Utilities. The goals of her program area include continuous improvement for participation in municipal compost programs and building markets for finished compost to grow healthy soils and landscapes to support a truly circular system. In Seattle, it's mandatory to separate organics for curbside collection or home composting, and certified compostable food serviceware is accepted for collection. So thank you for being here today, Kate, and take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so as Ashley introduced me, I'm Kate Kurtz with Seattle Public Utilities. We're a department of City of Seattle. And I'm going to talk today, of course, about compostable food serviceware here in our city's municipal system. Okay, so a little bit about our beautiful city on Puget Sound. So even though Seattle is the like urban hub for the entire Pacific Northwest, we are actually not that big of a city. So our population is less than 800,000. We're only 84 square miles. Although I will say that the entire Seattle metropolitan area is approximately 4 million people, and we have experienced truly rapid population growth over the last 10 to 15 years. So over the last 10 to 15 years, our population growth has increased by over 25%. And that's largely due to the expansion of the tech sector and the fact that we are a hub for that, right? Microsoft and Amazon are both headquartered here, and we're just growing like crazy. And that means that we need to teach new people the system all the time. So it's just constantly, education is never one and done. We're always having to continue teaching folks. Um, Yeah, and then the other thing that has changed quite a bit in our population over the last 10 to 15 years that has also created new challenges is that we have gone from a population, a residential population of primarily single family residents to now we're about half and half with the number of residents living in multifamily complexes and single family homes. Um, so even with all of those challenges, though, we have an overall diversion rate. So going from garbage, diverting to either compost or the recycling system of over 50%. And that's a big deal for us. And then also just getting the total amount of waste generated overall down as low as possible is also a primary goal for our utility and our city. Okay, so a little bit about our organic system specifically. So as Ashley mentioned in my introduction, organic service is mandatory for all customer sectors. So I recently moved, and I had to sign up for utilities, right? So that's like water, sewer, electric, gas, and of course solid waste. And the question when I was signing up for utilities was, what size cart do you want for, these 3 bins that you can see here? So black is garbage, blue is recycling, green is organic. So this is an older bin that just says yard waste. Our newer bins say yard and food, or maybe it says food and yard. I can't remember which order we put it in. But the question is just which size. It's not do you want. And that is true for single family, multifamily, and our business customers as well. And accepted in the organic stream is yard waste, food waste, and certified compostable food serviceware. And takeout containers from restaurants and grocery stores and the like in Seattle by municipal ordinance must be either recyclable or compostable. So our residents are really used to seeing these types of products. Moreover, dine-in, if there's going to be like a dine-in service that's using single-use things, you can think of like a fast serve restaurant, for example. They're usually not giving you like a nice like ceramic plate to eat off of. So if they're using single-use containers, they have to be compostable. And that's because you can't expect somebody who's dining in a restaurant to then wash and dry a container, which is what's required for it to be recyclable, right? So for it to be recyclable, we always teach our folks it has to be empty, clean, and dry. So those things have to be compostable. And the primary goal for our compostable container system and our municipal ordinance in this regard is to convey food scraps to the organics bin. It's really to get the food, it's to decrease those barriers, just make it easy for folks to just get the food to the compost facility and not let it go into the garbage where it's going to create a lot of problems. So in that context, we do not want non-food related compostable products in our organics collection system, right? We don't want like, those, I don't know. I see things all the time. Like my kids get toys, for example, that are sometimes wrapped in compostable plastic. And I'm like, no, this is not the point. But what you see here on your screen is one example of how we communicate these requirements and proper sorting to our residential customers. So you can see that it's like highly visual, very short, clear messages. And if you look here in this section in the middle where where we're showing about compostable food serviceware, we're saying that it has to be either certified or labeled compostable. So more and more, we are now teaching our residents to look for the word compostable. Is it compostable? Just look for that word to be on there. And the reason why we can do this, and this is new, so next slide, please, is because we have a new state law related to labeling of compostable plastics. And so now if you are going to sell or distribute compostable products in Washington state, It has to be labeled with the word compostable. It has to have a logo from a third-party certifier. And then there's also certain, like coloring and tinting requirements based on the item. Or it just has to be like completely wood or fiber-based with like no plastic in it at all. And the other thing that Washington State has done that I'm really, really appreciative of is prohibiting the use of words that are very confusing or misleading in this context. So for example, the word biodegradable is not allowed altogether on any kind of packaging. Okay, so where are we going and what are our big challenges? Well, there's a lot of challenges, actually. Accepting compostable products, as good as it is, and it really does help to decrease barriers and stuff going, conveying food to the food and yard waste cart, it confuses a lot of people. It's just confusing. So of course, a lookalike packaging is a big problem. I think we all know this. And the worst, offenders is when there'll be like an item comes together and half of it is compostable and the other half is not. For example, I got a to-go coffee cup yesterday morning where the cup itself was compostable and the lid was not. It was recyclable plastic, just regular plastic. So that's awful, right? That's a big issue. But really, what we find is that the bigger issue is people putting non-compostable packaging in the green bin. And I think that the reason why this is so confusing is because in a very real way, we are training people to put things other than food and plant debris in the compost bin, and it really invites chaos. So people put all kinds of packaged food as well as other things like pet waste bagged in regular non-compostable plastic, right? So they might see this bag of romaine or the yogurt cup, and they're like, this has gone bad, but it's food, so I'm going to put the whole thing in. And of course, that's not what we want them to be doing. On the other hand, we here in Seattle, even though we have it's mandatory to put your food in, all organics have to go into the compost bin, we still have a lot of food ending up in the garbage stream. And things like compostable food containers and food waste collection bags in particular make the process of sorting our waste properly a lot easier. And we need to reduce barriers to get the food out of the landfill and to the compost system. But we're still just continuously trying to figure out ways for how to do that in the best way possible and to get the vast majority of food to the compost system without also putting garbage in the compost stream. Because really, garbage in the compost stream really should be thought of as the equivalent of littering on the landscape, because the compost all gets used on the landscape, right? So if anybody has words of wisdom for me, I'm all ears. It's a difficult challenge that that we're continuously working to improve here in Seattle.
All right. Well, thank you, Kate. We got a lot of questions from your presentation, so expect quite a few of those coming your way a little later. Up next, we have Jake Duane. He is an environmental protection specialist for the WM-owned composting operation known as Specialized Environmental Technologies. Jake oversees quality control and environmental compliance, manages the compost sampling program, and provides regular outreach and education to the public. Jake also serves as a board member on the Minnesota Composting Council. So thank you for being here today, Jake, and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. And good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be, to everybody listening. And thank you, FPI, for the opportunity to present on some hopefully relevant topics about the role that compostable packaging and compostable products play, at least from a composter's perspective. So I wanted to provide a quick overview of our company, Specialized Environmental Technologies, or SET. It was a private composting company operating in the Twin Cities of Minnesota metro area since the 1990s. This company was purchased by WM in 2023. We are a longstanding member of the U.S. Composting Council, as well as the Minnesota Composting Council. And as Ashley mentioned, I've been serving on the MNCC as a board member since 2024. The SET operation of WM mainly consists of 4 large-scale composting facilities, 3 of which are yard waste or brush sites, and then 1 source-separated organics material processing facility. We take in roughly 250,000 cubic yards of brush or yard waste materials per year, with annual compost sales and soil blend sales ranging around 100 to 150,000 cubic yards per year. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. The one site that does process organics, which includes compostable food service products, would be our Empire Processing Facility. This is located about 30 miles southeast of Minneapolis. This site opened in 1997. It's permitted to accept organics so long as we operate under our permitting conditions, mainly that it's done on an impervious surface, so no groundwater contamination occurs. Also that we collect and transfer any of the contact water and deliver it to a wastewater treatment facility. We're also required to manage and remove any reject or residual materials from the process. And then also meet specific parameters for composting, such as temperature requirements to kill off pathogens, as well as weed seeds, and then maturity standards that we're required to meet as well before we're able to move all of that material off of that impervious surface. In 2024, this facility received about 25,000 tons of food scraps and other compostables. These are generated mainly from residential and commercial sources, as well as some industrial sources. We operates a aerated static pile method for composting. As much as I'd like to get into other details of our composting process, I'll just keep it at that. Mainly that we use aerated static pile with forced positive aeration. So we're pumping air into that system. Next slide, please. So the material that we accept, that we're permitted to accept, include any and all food scraps. This includes meat and dairy products, as well as bones. We also take in non-recyclable, uncoated food-related paper products, things such as napkins or paper towels, or food soiled pizza boxes, things of that nature. And then any compostable food service product that's been certified by BPI, we will also accept. Next slide. So getting into some of the opportunities of accepting these compostable products, there are, of course, a lot of opportunities on the front end, such as manufacturing single-use products out of something beyond petroleum. So getting a renewable resource into the market and replacing those petroleum-based products, kind of just like traditional recycling. We divert these products away from our landfills and incinerators. But speaking strictly as a composter, the main opportunity that we see is that it provides a vessel to capture those previously unavailable food scraps. That being said, the products themselves do carry some value. The product themselves can act as a decent carbon source, especially the paper products that get certified, as well as provide a source of a bulking agent, so it kind of fluffs up those piles to promote better airflow and drainage in those active composting piles. Next slide. So yeah, that being said, accepting compostable packaging is not without its challenges. From my perspective, the main issue that we see is contamination. But before talking about that, I'd say the first main issue that is often cited is that accessibility plays a huge role in the success of the compostable products industry. Getting people having the opportunity to actually see that those products enter into a composting facility is a huge opportunity as well as challenge. So without access to an industrial composting facilities, most of those products will end up in a landfill. And I've seen it all across the country. I stayed in a hotel in Kentucky that I know doesn't have a composting facility nearby, nor do they have green bins to dispose of all these compostable cups that I'm drinking my coffee out of. So I see it as a huge black eye on the industry, and it tarnishes the reputation of compostable products when you don't have access. Ultimate end of life use for those products. But back to the main bone that I have to pick with compostable products being contamination. So it's not to say that compostables themselves are contamination. In fact, they break down pretty readily in our system, but the unintended consequences of accepting compostable products, it likely will open the door to other forms of contamination. So this slide shows, I don't know, about 15, 20 or so different varieties of cups. These were all removed from a single load of organics that was delivered to our site, all from the Excel Energy Center in St. Paul. So this just illustrates the difficulty that the public faces with regards to proper waste disposal. And this is just for cups. So the same issue applies to any other form of compostable packaging that would have a recyclable or a garbage counterpart. So yeah, I mean, I've sorted through these loads a million times, and I've seen plenty of options. And you know, I've been in the industry for long enough to be able to identify what's compostable or not on a quick glance. But expecting the public to do it that doesn't have the same experience is kind of a lot to ask. So synchronizing waste streams to not have so many options to open the door to potential mistakes and problems can go a long way. Next slide, please. So from my point of view, as a composter that accepts packaging, you can see how easy it is for garbage and other contaminants to slip through some of those inspections that we perform when compostable bags and products can mask them. So the photo on the left is frankly, it should have a better use. I hate to see all that good produce go to waste at a compost facility. I mean, it'll make great compost, but I would think a food to animal or food to people program would have a better use for it. But anyways, you can see any garbage that might be dumped out in that pile versus the photo on the right, which is all in compostable bags. There's plenty of compostable packaging, cups and plates and clamshells and whatnot. And if there were bits of garbage or things put in the wrong bin, we probably wouldn't be able to see them in all those bags. It's just it really masks the potential for contaminants to enter our stream when you incorporate compostable products into your system. And by the way, that photo on the right is 100% clean organics. So if you go to the next slide, this is what a more typical organics load looks like from our facility, and identifying what's actually contaminants in there on a quick glance doing an inspection is very, very hard to identify what's truly contamination. I just took this picture last week just to throw something in the slide to show what a more true representation of organics load will look like and how difficult it is to identify contamination versus a compostable option. Next slide. So some of the solutions to accepting compostable packaging, one of the more promising things that Minnesota has done, and much like Kate had mentioned for Washington, is getting this compostable products labeling bill passed and into law. So this went into effect beginning of this year, but basically clear and reliable labeling of compostable products. It's really vital for both the composters as well as the consumers to be able to properly identify what is truly compostable. And it also will open the door to remove some bad actors that are selling greenwash products in the market that masquerade as compostable, such as plant-based or biodegradable, or things that basically word salad that doesn't have any meaning, whereas compostable is now defined, and then the products that garnish that label are required to meet certain standards. So for this particular bill to be labeled compostable and distributed in the state, all products labeled as compostable need to be made out of either uncoated wood or paper products with no coatings or additives. Also meeting ASTM specifications for composting at a facility, an industrial facility. And then the products must be labeled to reflect that they meet those standards. So this went into effect beginning of this year. At the beginning of next year, all those same products that'll be labeled compostable need to also be certified by a nonprofit third-party certifier packaging, compostable packaging, and that's pretty much eliminates any option except for BPI, which is what we've always accepted in the past. So it basically adheres to our internal policy, which we're all for. And for more information, there's a link at the bottom of that slide to look at that legislation. Next slide, please. So lastly, as equally as important as that labeling bill is just ensuring that the products do in fact break down in our or other composter systems. So bolstering that confidence of those products in the products themselves. So I've known for a long time that these products break down pretty quickly in our site, but my anecdotal evidence doesn't really mean much, doesn't mean all that much without any evidence or data to back it up. So things like the closed loop composting consortium study on disintegration, things that FPI are doing, all these really add and create confidence that these products do actually break down and are serving a purpose, and not just another feel-good story type of thing. So so really it's with gratitude that organizations like FPI exist and are working to improve this system. And with that, I have reached my time, and I thank you for your patience.
Great. Thank you, Jake. That was super insightful on how composting works in real life. So amazing. And so now I'm going to ask all of our panelists to turn on their video, come off mute, and I'm going to ask, I have a few questions, but we also got a lot in the Q&A section. So I think we'll be able to fill the remaining 15 minutes of our time. So Jake, I'm going to stay with you really quickly. And so you mentioned that you only accept BPI certified products. Why just BPI and not other certifications or like dual certifications or anything like that?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, mainly BPI. I should throw in that we also accept CMA or Compost Manufacturing Alliance products, but they do also need to carry that CMA logo and have it displayed prominently on the product. But that's unfortunately fairly rare. I haven't really seen any CMA labeled products, even though they're offering that option. But BPI is generally preferred, at least in North America, since it's it is the leading certifier of products here. That's not to throw any shade at TUV or anything else, in the European markets. It's just mainly consistency and trying to lessen consumer confusion, and having more different certifications out there can only add to that confusion. So we just drew a line at BPI, and they've been great with listening to composters and hearing our perspective. And they did a lot with getting PFAS out of the products that they certify, and ensuring that they adhere to labeling laws as well, and that they're requiring the use of their logo on the products. And that really goes a long way to instill confidence in composters, I think.
Great, thank you. Okay, Kate, I'm going to ask you, So how do you respond to composters and others saying that compostable products don't really break down in their system? And I guess this might be for both Kate and Jake. So Kate, if you wouldn't mind responding first.
Yeah. It's not a one size fits all. How do you respond to composters? I will say that City of Seattle is in contract with 2 composters, Cedar Grove and Lens Enterprises, to compost our municipally collected yard and food waste. And our program started actually with accepting the compostable food serviceware into our system, because it was Cedar Grove, who we were in contract with, alone at the time, said that they wanted it. So we, partnered with them, and that's how this program actually started with the city. Okay, so I've worked in the organics field for, I don't know, 21 years now. And so over the course of the last 21 years, I've been to a lot of different compost facilities, and they're all run differently. And the products that they make are all a bit different. And I will say that it is an expectation that composters tweak their processing conditions based on the feedstocks that they are accepting. So it wouldn't be expected that a composter would accept food waste and run their process exactly as if they were just doing yard waste or manure or biosolids, for example. These are all different feedstocks. And the same is true when you're accepting compostable packaging. You need to tweak your processing conditions based on the feedstocks that you're accepting. And these products are all shown repeatedly to actually break down, but the process conditions need to be optimized for those particular feedstocks. That is not a uniformly loved opinion in the organics industry, but that is largely how I respond to this discussion about composters saying like they don't break down or anything. The other thing is that I think no composter should be forced to accept these products. It's I'm not about that, and City of Seattle is also not doing that.
Yeah, if I could jump in too about just the physical degradation of those products, I would again point to that closed loop study. It shows that certified compostable plastic cutlery or cups or whatever it may be very, very successfully broke down in the composting process over a relatively short amount of time. Fibrous products took a little bit longer in general and didn't break down quite as much, but still, exceeded the minimum amount of, the minimum threshold to disintegrate. And that's mainly just because fibrous material is more sturdy and tough to degrade. But different technologies, like Kate mentioned, will aid in breaking that stuff down. So like physical agitation will allow that material to break down. Grinding or shredding it will allow it to break down to improve that surface area. But yeah, just the fact that there are organizations that are highlighting the successes of compostable packaging and in a real world situation really should aid in improving the industry as a whole. Of course, that's not enough alone to ensure the widespread acceptance of these materials. Adoption requires collaboration all across the value chain. You need to have clear labeling of compostable versus non-compostable, as well as investing in the infrastructure to actually collect and process these materials. So if there's nowhere for it to go, then it's basically a pointless endeavor to introduce all these compostable products when it just goes to a landfill anyways. I mean, great, it's a renewable source of material, but it's not being renewed when it goes to a landfill. It's just getting compressed and sent to its final disposal there instead of getting back into the soil where it truly belongs.
Okay, great. I'm going to switch it to Corianne now. So the featured communities in the study, how how are they working with their end site or their composters and processors to monitor contamination? And what does that feedback look like between the resident, the hauler, the processor? And I think we have a couple questions on contamination. So we'll start with you, Corianne, on that.
Yeah, and of course, Kate and Jake can add to it as they would like. But yeah, some examples that I mentioned were the lid flips. Many of the communities do conduct lid flips, which are going to the carts, the residential carts, and seeing contamination before they're tipped into the collection truck, so that they can leave an oops tag or a tag that notes what materials are going in the cart that should not be going in that bin. And so that's a really good way of notifying their residents of the potentially accidental contaminations. And then also with that information, aggregating that information and updating their messaging on their social media pages, on their flyers, that is tailored to those updates, where they might see a trend in those materials that are ending up in the bin that should not otherwise. And then also those waste characterization studies or those facility evaluations is also a good way to see what is coming up as the common contaminant. So one of the common contaminants was plastic bags. And so reinforcing that messaging when you do have that data that you're conducting at the compost site with that messaging. So I think that's where there's that evolution of messaging when you're doing that, those updates and studies around contaminants.
Great. Thank you. And then so let's talk about like equipment that's being used at a composter. This one was from the Q&A section. Can you talk about the kind of technologies or potential advanced technologies that are being used to separate contamination at the composter? So Corianne, maybe talk about what you saw when you were talking with these different municipalities. Kate, if you wanted to talk about what your composters are using, and Jake, what you guys use.
Yeah, one that I will reference, so it's not necessarily at the compost site, but it is a unique scenario, is Ramsey County in Minnesota is partnering with their transfer station to utilize robotic technology to separate the compost bags collected within the trash stream. And so there was a question around AI and robotic technologies. And so that's one that I wanted to expand upon around that kind of evolution and that unique scenario of one of those case studies that were featured.
I will say at the facilities that City of Seattle partners with, it's like the contamination reduction technology is like, it's sophisticated and multi-layered. It looks like gosh, what's it called? A Rube. I'm forgetting the name. You guys help me out. You know what
Rube
it's,
Goldberg kind
yeah, it
of.
looks like
Yeah.
it looks like that. There's just like so many steps. So there's like,
Yep.
you know, like the magnets, and there's like a thing for glass, and there's the airlift separator and stuff for the plastic, and it happens on the front end when they're getting the feedstocks are coming in, and then they do it after they've reached the PFRP, which is the high heat requirement, you know, before they go to curing, and then after curing, then there's more contamination reduction. I will say that one thing that is built into our contracts that really does a lot to incentivize us at the municipal level to keep that contamination level low is that any contamination that is received at the facilities, that gets put to the side, and we have to come pick up that garbage and haul it away and then landfill it at our expense. So keeping that contamination level really low is, you know, we have an operational and a financial incentive to do that as well.
Yeah, just to piggyback on both of those. Yeah, the co-collection with trash is a great technology being utilized in St. Paul and Ramsey and Washington County, I should say. But that's really limits the amount of contamination entering the stream, since an open bin or an open dumpster labeled organics is inherently going to receive trash being dumped in there. But when you have a closed off tied bag, more often than not, the people that fill that bag are following the rules and doing it properly. As far as technology on the back end, our facility uses a relatively gentle approach to processing organics. So any contamination that does end up in our process will remain relatively intact, and we can screen it out with mechanical screeners. Ideally, in a perfect world, there would be no contamination. We would grind or shred all of the organics along with the yard waste and other feedstocks to make it break down as rapidly as possible. But until we get there, we're just going to, if we grind up a glass bottle and it breaks into a million pieces, that's going to contaminate our finished compost, and probably, at best, we won't have that customer that we sell that compost to. At worst, we'll have lawsuits on our hands. Then the only other thing I'd mention in a hushed tone would be depackaging units, which pulls the compostable and true contamination out of the system before it enters the composting process. What the composter does with that material after the fact is up to them. I think that if it's a clean load and all of the packaging is compostable, then they can process that material separately, make compost the best they can out of it, and then move on from there. If it's a contaminated load, at least they're pulling out all the trash that went along with it. But there's more issues with depackaging than it seems. It's not the silver bullet that the depackaging unit manufacturers seem to make it out to be, but it is an option out there as well. It's being utilized more often than not.
Great. Well, we're getting close to time, so I'm just going to ask one final question to you all. If you had one piece of advice for like a municipality or a composter that's looking to accept compostable packaging, what would that be? And so I'm going to go, I will just call you out. Corianne, Kate, and Jake will do that same order, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I would say in note to the slide of clear, consistent, and robust messaging. And so staying up to date on the materials that are ending up in the source separation organics bin, and monitoring those materials, updating those educational flyers based on any contaminants that you're receiving, and then also being very, very clear with messaging of what is accepted, and trying to make that as seamless and as straightforward as possible.
I would recommend a very intentional and strategic approach. Seattle's grew kind of organically, and I wouldn't recommend that, because it's changed a lot over the years. I would make sure that everybody was on board with what the requirements were before it started to get communicated to businesses and residents, and then be as simple and concise as possible with that communication so that it's easy to understand.
Yeah, I would say, well, depending on where you are in your program, don't put the cart before the horse. If you have a program that is just starting off the ground and you don't have composting yet, don't incorporate compostable packaging in right away. Start with food scraps, then incorporate maybe some napkins and paper towels, and things are going great. Then introduce compostable packaging to that. If you already have semi-robust composting industry in your area, then adding compostables might be the right option for you. And then, yeah, if you're a community looking to do organics recycling and not just thinking about the composting of that material, starting slow and growing from it instead of just doing it all at once and then biting off more than you can chew and having to walk things back. Because educating the public, when you say they can put this in the bin and then you yank that rope away from them, they're going to continue putting that same thing in the bin down the line. I know traditional recycling has that same problem.
Yep, definitely. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists. This was a great webinar. Thank you to our attendees. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. The recording of this webinar, you will get an email when it's uploaded with a link to YouTube. So thank you again, everybody, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.